I'm Jason Thornock, third generation rancher here in the Bear River Valley, here just north of Cokeville today. These are my two boys.
Sir, I'm Nathan Thornock. I'm Jason's second son, and I help out around here during the summer.
And I'm Blake Thornock. I'm Jason's oldest son, and I'm here full time to help around the farm.
So we've been ranching in this valley for more than 80 years here in the Bear River Valley. Started with my grandpa up in Randolph, and this is where it all started, in these meadows here. We're standing in a meadow here that's irrigated out of the Bear River. Back in the early 1900s, they started to dam up the river and put in big canals and irrigation ditches to flood these meadows. That's where haying started here. It was a ranching community. All this was just to feed cows during the winter and get through the winter time. So that's where it all started. We've seen it all, I guess, in 80 years. Started with scatter rakes, dragging big piles of hay up. Grandpa told stories about going out in the winter time and with a team of horses and a sleigh and pitching hay onto the sleigh and then pulling out in the field and pitching it back off to the cows and starting a little fire there with a little hay to warm his hands up in the winter time. So it really wasn't a farming community. That's probably just come about in the last 20 or 30 years where we started to get pivots and pump water up on ground that hadn't previously been irrigated. Today we have 18 pivots irrigating about 2,600 acres under pivot. We've got about 700 acres of these meadows, and that's what we're doing here today, is baling meadow hay. And this hay will just be fed to our cows. And so we have these pivots and we're raising alfalfa hay. We raise Timothy, and then we just raise small grains, and we just cut the small grain hay for hay for cows. The steamers were bought for our alfalfa and our Timothy. When we first bought them, it was probably more focused on the alfalfa, because in this valley, we have 1,500 acres that's in alfalfa, and you have to cut that alfalfa when it's ready and when you have a window in the weather. And so we try to knock down that 1,500 acres in a week's time. Before steamers, we would cut down 200 acres a day because that's about how much we could bale in a 24-hour period. So as that hay would dry, our problem was getting that hay baled in the perfect window to raise the right kind of hay, or to bale the right kind of hay. So we'd go out when the sun went down, or close to when the sun went down, and of course the dew wasn't there yet, so we're shattering hay. It's too early. We'd bale till 10 or 11, 12 o'clock. You start getting a little dew and the conditions would start to get right, and by 2 o'clock you had too much dew. So on the front end you're shattering hay, and on the back end you're browning hay with too much dew. But we had to do that because we had to get through 200 acres a day, because we had to do another 200 acres tomorrow, and so we were just dealing with the consequences. We'd been looking at steamers for several years. I liked the concept. Just felt like the investment was too much for what we were getting out of our hay. A couple of years ago, I had a buyer show up and he was probing my hay, and he said, "Man, this is nice hay. I could have bought it, but it's all shattered. If you had some steamers, maybe I could have bought this hay." And so we got really serious about it and decided to take the leap, and several people told us just buy one and just try one, and if you like it, buy a second one. But that's not how we work. We're all in or all out, right? So we bought 2 steamers, and last year was our first year running the steamers, and just changed everything for us, I guess. So now we can start baling earlier in the afternoon. We usually start baling about 5 o'clock, and we can bale till 2 o'clock. So that gives us 9 hours of baling time, whereas before, maybe 5 hours. And it's all ideal conditions because we set the stage now. We provide the conditions. We put the moisture in that we need to keep the leaves from shattering and make good solid bales and pretty hay. And it's just, I guess that's been the life-changing part of it for me, is just taking the stress out of making nice hay. When you lay all that hay down, your whole livelihood is on the line. You've put everything into that for the last year: fertilizer, irrigation, pumping expenses. You lay that hay down and all of a sudden it's all on the line for about a week. So that's been the big thing to me, is just knowing that when we're baling hay, we're doing it right, and we don't have anything to hide when the buyers come out. It's all the same, the hay's all the same, all test between 12 and 13% moisture. The leaves are there, good solid bales, and we're not afraid to show our hay to anybody anymore. We're not trying to hide anything.
One really cool thing that I've seen about these steamers over the last couple of years that we've had them is just the ability to be able to kind of play Mother Nature a little bit. At least for my experience running these steamers, I have yet to find hay that is too dry that you can't bale it anymore. And like my dad had mentioned before with the Timothy hay, we'd go out and we'd bale that hay dry. We'd have bells exploding behind us and stuff like that, and you could actually make the Timothy way too dry to the point that it was just completely unbaleable. But with these steamers, we've been able to play a little bit of Mother Nature with the Timothy, and we have yet to have hay that's too dry to bale with these things. But I remember in high school, the level of stress that we had to get all the hay into a bale before the rainstorm came the next day was just unbelievable. And we'd go out and we'd just be pushing. We'd be getting 24 flakes per bale in the middle of the night, just hammering as hard as we could, shearing flywheel bolts, all the fun stuff, just to get that hay up into a bale so that we could beat the rain the next day. And I remember when we finally were able to transition to steamers just this last year, the level of urgency was still there, but the amount of stress went down tremendously, because we knew that when we went out to go and bale hay, we could go bale into that dew window just a little bit, but if the hay wasn't right, if the conditions weren't just perfect, we could wait just that extra day in order to let the hay dry out a little bit more and just go right back to it baling.
My job more in high school was with the part of loading and hauling the hay out of the field. Before we got these steamers, it was really a mess. There was broken bales every single field, strings scattered everywhere. We'd have to go gather up the bales again, and it made a real nasty bale. Lots of marshmallows, and you'd load those up on the truck, tipping bales off the truck constantly. We'd have stacks fall just because we had not as many solid bales. That's your entire livelihood in that stack. When it comes down, it's not a good day, for sure. And so as I saw that versus the transition to now with the steamers, it's complete different. The hay's in perfect condition. It's nice solid bales that we can load up, we can haul off the field. It's made a complete difference in how we run things around here during haying season.
Lived here all my life in Cokeville, Wyoming. I was actually born in Randolph, Utah. But my dad and his brother bought a ranch down here in about 1950. We moved down here soon after that. Been here a long time. Now we put up as much hay as we do cows. Started with a pivot just to feed our own cows so we didn't have to buy hay, and it's gone from there. Now what have we got? 16, 17 pivots? 18 pivots. This place produces a lot of hay right now, but it hasn't been easy. We used to put the bales up in little bales. Put the hay up in little bales behind some old international balers. And I spent the first 6-7 years of my haying career on a scatter rake. It was just after we put in our first pivot. It was alfalfa, and we wanted to get it up better. So we bought a big baler. And that was back in the days when those balers were a lot of work. But they took adjustments every day. Grease them, it took you a good 2 hours to grease the cock, I think. The latest addition is these steamers, and they seem to find a place here. So these hay buyers like that steamed hay. I had a hay buyer the other day tell me that he was responsible for us buying those steamers. Said he spent our money. So it's a good deal. It makes the hay prettier. You can control the moisture better. Gives you a bigger window to hay in. Our hayers like it, the kids like them, so I guess that's all that matters.
You know, when I was a kid, I just always had that feeling that I always wanted to come back, that I always wanted to do this for the rest of my life. It was just always in my head that this is what I wanted and this is what I wanted to do. My dad always makes the funny quote, everybody who comes back and gets into ranching and works cows and stuff like that, they just don't know any better. That's half the problem. And maybe that was my case too, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this is the type of lifestyle that I really love doing. It's been a mindset that my dad has given us since a very young age that if we're not growing and we're not improving, then we're falling back behind and then we're regressing. And so having the mindset to be looking forward and finding ways to grow our operation, and sometimes growing doesn't necessarily mean just expanding your land and your herd size, but it can mean just improving what you already have. As a kid, when we first started out really getting into the hay business, I mean, we went from probably 4 or 5 pivots to now 18. And that was all pretty much on the same land that we started with, you know, and it's just been a demonstration to me how you can improve the land that you already have and make it output to the maximums if you can find the opportunities to do that. And one of the funniest things that my grandpa always says is one of the best things that has ever been invented is a ton bale, because now we don't have to pack any hay. And I gotta agree with that. That's true. We've done a lot of 3-stringers and 2-stringers in the past, and I can attest to the fact that ton bales are the way to go for us. You know, I think the improvement in technology has really allowed us to increase our output on our ranch and be able to improve what we already have. And that goes not only just for the machinery and the steamers and stuff like that, but also on the cow side of things, you know, improving our vaccination programs, improving the way that we handle things. You're on camera.
Huh?
You're on camera.
I know, it's embarrassing.
Just kidding. Hey, when you're bunching these bells, are you just going to bunch them on the high spots over there?
I was going over to do that.
Okay, make sure you bunch them on the high spots so we don't get stuck with the semi-truck. That's about it. If there's not a lot of bells over there, you might have to tote them out and put them more on the main stuff.
I was going to put them on those too.
Okay, that would be good. Okay, don't have too much fun.
So I don't know where I heard about them. I think it was in a farm magazine or something where they'd advertise steamers, and I'd watched the videos on YouTube, and we'd been thinking about them for quite a while. Just felt like that was a real big investment for what we were doing in Cokeville, Wyoming, because we're cow guys. We're not, I mean, we're getting pretty big into the hay business, but we've always been cow guys, and so hay was always secondary to our operation. But as we started to sell more and more alfalfa and Timothy, we could see that we weren't meeting the buyer's expectations with what we were providing. So we were taking a secondary market rather than hitting the peak. There's a big difference now between premium hay and feeder hay. Everybody's got feeder hay, and the premium hay is harder to put up because everything has to be about right. So that's kind of what pushed us over the edge. Like I mentioned before, the customer that exports hay and usually has a premium price couldn't buy our hay because it was shattered, and so that kind of pushed us over the edge. Same thing with the alfalfa. That same customer that told me he couldn't buy my hay 2 years ago bought our hay last year. This spring our hay tested as good as it ever has, probably better than it ever has, and I attribute a lot of that to be able to keep the leaf in the bale and getting it baled in that perfect window, because now we can get through our fields faster. We're doing 300 acres a day rather than the 200, so that shaves a few days off, and that all helps with your test at the end of the day.
I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen is the increased bale weight. During the wintertime, I'm kind of the guy in charge of loading all the dry vans and shipping the trucks off and stuff. And I've had lots of truck drivers that have been like, "You've overloaded me. It's just way too heavy. Have to come back and take a bale off," or something like that. But I know that before we had the steamers, when we were loading trucks out, we would always have to load them completely full, and there was still a little bit of room to play with the weight. So we weren't really getting enough weight onto the trailers as we can now with the steamers.
That's key when it's going clear to California to LA, and you're sending trailers that are 5,000 pounds lighter than what they could have been. That adds up in a hurry. And now, like Blake says, we have to hold bales off because we can overload those trailers. Timothy, the same thing. Our bales went from 1,300 pounds to 1,600, 1,650, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in a Timothy bale, that's quite a bit. And 350 pounds per bale on 26 bales, that's a lot more weight we're putting on a truck. It's just saving that much more freight. So we hope our buyers appreciate it, and we hope they keep that in mind when they come out and talk to us this year.
I feel like one of our goals around here is maximum efficiency and quality while we do so. And the steamer is exactly that. Like my dad mentioned, we're able to go out and get 300 plus acres done a day, over 1,000 bales sometimes in a day. And that makes a huge difference when we're able to get our alfalfa crop up in a week instead of taking 2 weeks. And lots of times you'll start cutting hay and you look in the forecast and you have 10 days that look all right, but the weatherman's never exactly where you want it to be. And so the faster that we can get that hay out of the field and into the stack and with a tarp on it, the better. And so that's exactly what the steamer helps us to accomplish.
This year we're ahead of schedule, but it's been hot and dry, so if nothing else, it's going to allow us to get our crops off the field sooner and get some regrowth, more regrowth for our cows. And we're kind of in the middle of a drought here right now, so that can get really big really fast because the cows are going to come home early, and we'll have more feed for them down here in the valleys just because we've got the hay off sooner and been able to get some more regrowth. So there's lots of little hidden benefits. I don't know if they've totally paid for themselves yet. This is just our second year. I think last year we took a big chunk out of them with being able to get into that Timothy market that wasn't available to us. We sold our alfalfa last year, I feel like right at the top of the market, so that helps. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, we finished baling our Timothy, and we put up 3,500 ton of Timothy in about 5 days. The day, I think it was 2 days ago, we finished. We had it all in the bale and we were hauling it, and we had a big microburst come through here. If we hadn't had steamers and had it all in a bale, it would have scattered our windrows all across the valley. And just as we were putting the last bale in the stack, we had thunderclouds all around us, and it was raining all around us. A couple thousand ton of Timothy in the windrow, got it rained on. You would have paid for a steamer right then. It's in the stack, the tarp's on it, and I don't care what that rainstorm does anymore. In fact, I wish it would rain. We could use it. It doesn't take long to pay for a steamer in just 1 or 2 little instances like that. I think I could confidently say that our steamers on our operation have put an extra $20 to $30 a ton on our alfalfa that we wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And I think on our Timothy, that's probably $30 to $50 a ton, the added value. And if you're already baling perfect hay, you've got a perfect climate, and it always allows you to put your hay up so that it meets that premium level. It may not pay for itself quite as fast. I don't ever want to bale Timothy ever again without a steamer. I don't care if it brings me $1 more. Just the stress level that it takes off, even if it just breaks even, I don't want to bale Timothy again without a steamer. When I'm baling alfalfa, it's just an enjoyable experience again. I'm not counting the minutes and the flakes and the hours, and I can just be confident knowing I'm making a good, solid product and doing the very best I can.
I don't think I've ever heard my dad say before that if we need to wait till tomorrow to bale, we can wait till tomorrow. Like that was a completely new addition to his vocabulary this year, for sure. And that's all because of the steamer. Like, we have that opportunity that we can start earlier in the day. And I feel like the stress that takes off has a value in itself that maybe may not factor in financially, but I feel like that's worth something.
So we're still pushing hard, but we're doing it all in an ideal window now. And the dew's coming a little too heavy, and the moisture meter's starting to jump on the gazeka, and you're thinking, I'm crowded a little bit here. We would have crowded it before. But now I'm saying, Nathan, if it's not ideal, quit at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. We'll pick that up tomorrow. We can do it. Whereas before, we would have pushed it, and we'd have been sorting bales off that were too heavy.
You know, if I were to tell anybody about the steamer or anything, I would probably tell them, you know, you can make pretty hay with or without the steamer. There's no doubt you can make hay without the steamer and it still be pretty. But the amount of time that you have in order to put that hay and make the perfect bale is really short in this valley compared to what you could if you had the steamer. Like they said before, it looks like a massive train going through the field with the accumulators and everything like that. And I imagine we get a few little smirks from neighbors wondering what we're doing driving this massive semi-trailer through our fields everywhere. But I will say that it's worth it, and we can do so much more that we couldn't do before without them.
I just say bailing's fun again. It's an enjoyable experience again. If you're on the edge and you're thinking about it and the numbers line up for you, do it. I don't have any regrets.